They laughed when I walked into that courtroom. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous titter. A real laugh. The kind that comes from deep certainty, from knowing how a story ends before it even begins. And on that Tuesday morning in October, I stood alone in courtroom 7B of the Fulton County Superior Court, with nothing but a worn leather briefcase and the kind of quiet anger that takes years to build. My husband sat across the aisle in a $5,000 Tom Ford suit, flanked by 3 attorneys from the most expensive law firm in Atlanta. Behind him sat his mistress, 29 years old, Instagram perfect, wearing my anniversary earrings. And when the bailiff called my name, when I stood up to represent myself because I couldn't afford a lawyer, my husband's attorney actually smiled. "Your Honor," he said, voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. Mrs. Green was a nurse, a noble profession certainly, but she has no understanding of corporate finance, asset protection, or the complex legal frameworks that govern high-net-worth divorces. The judge, a white woman in her 50s who looked like she'd already decided this case over her morning coffee, sighed the way you sigh at a child who insists on touching a hot stove. "Mrs. Green," she said, "are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed without counsel?" I looked at her. I looked at my husband. I looked at that mistress with my earrings, and I said, "Yes, Your Honor, I'm certain." What they didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 62-year-old black woman with 40 years of nursing experience became the person her husband feared most. Before I go any further, I need to know you're here with me. Drop a comment. Just say listening, or tell me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's not just my story. It's the story of every woman who's ever been told she's too old, too poor, too black, too tired to fight back. And if you've ever been made to feel invisible, please subscribe. Not for me, for the next woman who needs to know that being underestimated is not a weakness, it's a weapon. My name is Lana Marie Green, and for 40 years, I was a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in downtown Atlanta. 40 years of 12-hour shifts. 40 years of reading doctors' terrible handwriting and catching their mistakes before those mistakes killed someone. 40 years of holding hands while people took their last breaths, of teaching new mothers how to breastfeed, of talking teenagers through their first panic attacks. 40 years of being essential and invisible at the same time. I retired in 2010 at 60 years old, not because I wanted to, because my knees couldn't take another double shift, and my back had finally said enough. I'd been a widow for 5 years by then. My first husband, Robert, died of a heart attack in 2005. We'd been married 31 years. Good years, mostly. We raised 2 kids in a 3-bedroom house in southwest Atlanta. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. When Robert died, he left me the house, paid off, and about $80,000 in savings. Not rich, but comfortable, secure. For 5 years after his death, I lived quiet. I volunteered at the church. I took up quilting. I watched my grandkids every Thursday. I was what people call settled. And then I met Reginald Thompson. Reggie. I met him at a charity gala in 2012. One of those fancy downtown hotel events where they serve food you can't pronounce and everyone's dressed like they're attending the Oscars. I'd only gone because my daughter Aaliyah worked for the catering company and got me a ticket. I remember standing by the bar, feeling out of place in my good church dress, when this tall, handsome black man in an elegant suit walked up and said, "You look like the only person in this room who knows real work when she sees it." That was Reggie. Reginald Marcus Thompson, 58 years old, CEO and founder of Thompson Logistics Solutions, a freight and supply chain company that moved goods up and down the eastern seaboard. He was recently widowed, too. His wife had died of breast cancer 2 years earlier. We talked for 3 hours that night. About loss. About starting over. About how strange it felt to be in your late 50s and suddenly alone after decades of partnership. He called me the next day, then the day after that. 8 months later, he proposed. Now my kids, Jerome and Aaliyah, they had doubts, Jerome especially. "Mama," he said, sitting at my kitchen table the night I showed them the ring, "you barely know this man, and he's rich. Why would someone like him want—" He stopped himself, but I knew what he was going to say. Why would someone like him want someone like me? I was 60. Reggie was 58. I was a retired nurse living on a pension. He was a millionaire with a company worth hundreds of millions. I shopped at Marshall's. He had a tailor. But here's what I told Jerome that night, and I remember the words exactly. Baby Reggie loves me because I don't want his money. I got my own house. I got my own pension. I don't need him. I want him. And that's a different thing entirely. Jerome didn't look convinced, but he hugged me anyway. We got married in April 2012 at a small ceremony at the Biltmore Ballroom. Reggie's best friend from college, Devin Carter, his CFO, was the best man. Devin gave a toast that night. He raised his glass and said, "Reggie, my brother, you finally found someone who sees you for who you really is." Everyone clapped. I smiled. The first few years were good. Better than good. Reggie treated me like a queen. He bought me things I'd never imagined owning. Designer bags, jewelry, trips to Paris and Dubai. He introduced me to people I'd only seen on TV. But here's the thing about marrying rich when you've been working class your whole life. You never stop feeling like a guest in your own life. I never felt like his house was my house. I never felt like his friends were my friends. And I sure as hell never felt like his business was any of my business. He liked it that way. "Lana," he'd say, kissing my forehead as he left for work, "you don't need to worry about all that corporate nonsense. That's my world. You just focus on being happy." And I was happy, for a while. But around year 10, I started noticing things, little things, the kind of things you notice when you've spent 40 years reading patient charts and catching inconsistencies. Like how Reggie's phone was suddenly password protected when it never had been before. Like how he started working late 3-4 nights a week, and when I'd ask what project was keeping him so busy, his answers were always vague. Like how his CFO, Devin, the man who'd been at our wedding, who'd eaten Sunday dinners at our table, stopped making eye contact with me. And then there was Jasmine Brooks. I first saw her name on a credit card statement in January 2023. Jasmine Brooks. Marketing consultant. 8 charges over 2 months. Dinners at restaurants Reggie had never taken me to. A hotel in Buckhead. Flowers from a boutique florist. I didn't confront him right away. I'm a nurse. Nurses don't panic. We assess. So I started paying attention. I noticed that every Tuesday and Thursday, Reggie came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. Something younger, sweeter, cheaper. I noticed that his business trips to Charleston and Savannah always seemed to coincide with posts on a certain Instagram account, at @JasmineBrooks_ATL. 29 years old. Marketing specialist at Thompson Logistics. In every company photo, standing just a little too close to my husband. On March 15th, 2023, I remember the date because it was 3 days after our 11th anniversary, I decided to look deeper. Reggie had set up what he called a family backup system in our home office 5 years earlier. All our devices, his laptop, his phone, his tablet, my phone, my iPad, synced to a central server in the basement. He'd insisted on it. "This way, baby. If anything ever happens, all our photos, documents, everything is in one place. It's convenient." I'd thought it was sweet at the time. Paranoid maybe, but sweet. That night, while Reggie was working late, I went down to the basement and opened that backup server. And I found everything. Not just evidence of the affair, though there was plenty of that. Text messages, photos, hotel receipts. I found financial documents that should never have been on a home server. Corporate records, trusts, offshore accounts, payroll data. I found an entity called the Clearwater Family Trust, registered in Delaware, holding $34 million. I found the name Trevor Thompson, Reggie's son from his first marriage. The son he'd told me had died in a car accident in 2017. Except Trevor wasn't dead. He was living in Grand Cayman, managing his father's hidden assets. I sat in that basement for 4 hours, reading through file after file, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not heartbreak, not betrayal. Clarity. See, when you've been a nurse as long as I have, you learn to spot patterns. You learn that when someone lies about one thing, they're usually lying about everything. And you learn that the sickest patients are often the ones who insist they're fine. Reggie was sick. His whole life was sick. And I'd been so busy being grateful for his love that I hadn't seen the rot underneath. But now I saw it. All of it. And I had a choice to make. I could confront him right then. Demand a divorce. Take my half of the marital assets and walk away. Or I could wait. I could document. I could build a case. I could make sure that when this marriage ended, it didn't just end. It exposed. Because here's what I'd also found in those files. Payroll records for Thompson Logistics employees. And those records didn't match the retirement account deposits. Reggie wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from his workers. For 2 weeks, I didn't say a word. I smiled at breakfast. I kissed him goodbye. I played the role of the devoted wife. And every night I went back to that basement and copied files. Bank statements, emails, corporate bylaws, trust documents. I organized them by date. I cross-referenced them. I built a timeline. And then, in April 2023, exactly 1 year ago from the courtroom scene I started this story with, I confronted him. Not about the documents, not about the theft, not even about Trevor being alive, just about Jasmine. We were having dinner, salmon and asparagus. I'd made his favorite. I put down my fork and said, "Reggie, I know about Jasmine Brooks." He looked up, and for just a second, I saw panic flash across his face. Then he smoothed it into confusion. "Who?" "The girl from marketing, the one you've been sleeping with for 6 months." Silence. Then, "Lana, you're imagining things." "Am I?" I kept my voice calm. "So if I call her right now, she won't answer?" His jaw tightened. "Don't." "Why not? If there's nothing going on?" "Because you're being paranoid." His voice rose. "Jesus, Lana, is this what retirement does to you? You sit around all day inventing problems?" I let him yell. I let him call me paranoid, jealous, menopausal, bored. And when he was done, I said, "I want a divorce." He stared at me. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Lana, I'll make it easy for you," I said. "I don't want your business. I don't want your houses. I just want what's fair. We can do this quietly." He looked at me for a long time, and then something shifted in his expression. The panic was gone. What replaced it was colder. "Fine," he said. "You want a divorce? We'll get a divorce." He stood up from the table, pulled out his phone, and made a call right there in front of me. "Devin? Yeah, it's me. I need you to freeze the joint accounts. All of them. Tonight." My heart skipped. "Reggie," he held up a hand, "and call Bradford Hayes. Tell him I need a divorce attorney. The best." He hung up, looked at me. "You want fair, Lana? Let's see how fair you think it is when you can't afford a lawyer." Within 48 hours, every joint bank account was frozen. Every credit card we'd shared, canceled. The emergency fund I thought we had for situations like this turned out it had been in his name only. Gone. I called 3 divorce attorneys. All of them wanted a $50,000 retainer just to start. I had $8,000 in my personal checking account, the remnants of my nursing pension that I'd kept separate. That was it. That was all I had. My kids offered to help, but Jerome was a high school teacher with 2 kids of his own, and Aaliyah worked 2 jobs to pay off nursing school loans. I couldn't take their money, so I did the only thing I could do. I went to the Fulton County Law Library, checked out every book on family law and civil procedure I could carry, and I started teaching myself how to be my own lawyer. For 6 months, while Reggie's legal team filed motion after motion, I sat in that library like I was back in nursing school. I took notes. I made flashcards. I watched YouTube videos on cross-examination techniques. And I kept copying files from that basement server. Because Reggie had made a crucial mistake. In his rush to lock me out financially, he'd forgotten about the home backup system. Or maybe he'd assumed I didn't know how to access it. Or maybe he'd assumed I was exactly what he'd always told people I was. Just a nurse who didn't understand complex financial matters. Whatever the reason, he left that door open, and I walked right through it. October 17th, 2024, the courtroom was everything you see on TV, but colder, older. The kind of room designed to make you feel small. I walked in wearing a navy dress from Talbot's, the kind of dress that says respectable church lady, and carried a briefcase I'd bought at a thrift store for $12. Across the aisle, Bradford Hayes and 2 associate attorneys, all in suits that cost more than my car. Stacks of binders, color-coded with little tabs. 3 paralegals with laptops. And Reggie, my husband of 12 years, in a charcoal suit with a lavender tie I'd given him for Christmas, looking at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Behind him, in the second row, Jasmine Brooks, long weave, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, legs crossed, chewing gum, wearing my diamond anniversary earrings. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood. Judge Eleanor Price entered. White woman, mid-50s, silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She had a reputation in Atlanta legal circles. Brilliant, fair, but absolutely intolerant of anyone who wasted her time. She looked at the docket, then at both sides of the courtroom, and her expression shifted to something like resignation. "Thompson versus Green," she said. "Dissolution of marriage." She looked at Bradford Hayes. "Counsel?" Bradford stood smoothly. "Bradford Hayes of Morrison and Hayes, Your Honor, representing petitioner Reginald Thompson." Judge Price's gaze shifted to me. The empty table, the single yellow legal pad, the plastic cup of water. "Mrs. Green, are you represented?" I stood. The chair scraped against the floor louder than I expected, and I felt every eye in that courtroom lock on to me. "No, Your Honor," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm representing myself." The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at me the way I used to look at patients who refused to take their medication. "Mrs. Green, I'm going to ask you this once, and I need you to listen carefully. Your husband is the CEO of a major corporation. There are significant marital assets at issue: real estate, equity interests, retirement accounts. Mr. Thompson's counsel has over 20 years of experience in complex divorces." She paused. "Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed without representation?" Behind me, someone in the gallery snickered. I heard Jasmine whisper something. I heard Reggie's low chuckle. I kept my eyes on this judge. "Your Honor, I can't afford counsel. My husband made sure of that." Bradford Hayes rose immediately, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "For the record, Your Honor, Mr. Thompson did not prevent Mrs. Green from retaining counsel. He simply secured the marital accounts, as is his right, to prevent irresponsible spending during the separation period. We offered Mrs. Green a generous settlement of $75,000 to assist with her transition. She refused. The word transition hung in the air like a polite euphemism for erasure. Judge Price's eyebrows lifted slightly. "$75,000? More than Mrs. Green brought into the marriage, Your Honor," Bradford continued, and I heard the subtext loud and clear. "She married up. She should be grateful for anything." The judge looked at me again. "Mrs. Green, if you proceed pro se, you will be held to the same standards as any attorney. I will not guide you through procedure. I will not help you with objections. If you fail to follow the rules of evidence, you lose. If you fail to ask the right questions, you lose. Do you understand?" Every cell in my body wanted to sit down, sign whatever paper they put in front of me, and walk away. But then I thought about Sharon Mitchell. Sharon, who'd worked in Reggie's warehouse for 23 years. Who'd come to me 6 months ago, after I'd posted on Facebook that I was going through a divorce. Who'd told me, crying to my living room, that something was wrong with her retirement account. That money was being deducted from her paycheck but not showing up in her balance. I thought about the files I'd seen. The gap between payroll deductions and custodial deposits. $2.3 million. Gone. Stolen. From people who couldn't afford to lose a single dollar. I looked at Judge Price. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." "Very well." She didn't look happy about it, but she gestured to Bradford. "Counsel, your opening statement. Keep it brief." Bradford stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the center of the courtroom like he was taking a stage. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Thompson built Thompson Logistics from the ground up. He took the financial risk. He worked the 80-hour weeks. He created hundreds of jobs. Mrs. Green, while a respected healthcare professional, made no direct financial contribution to the business enterprise. She maintained the home. She was a supportive spouse, but that does not entitle her to half of everything my client built before they ever met." He paused for effect. "Mrs. Green is now seeking to leverage this divorce into an unwarranted claim on corporate equity, restricted stock options, and trusts she has no legal right to. We will demonstrate that her allegations of hidden assets are baseless, that her understanding of corporate finance is limited, and that her emotional state has compromised her judgment." He let that last part sink in. "Your Honor, we ask this court to adopt our proposed settlement and allow Mr. Thompson to move forward with his life and his business." He sat down like he'd just closed a sale. Judge Price looked at me. "Mrs. Green, your opening." I stood up. I didn't walk to the podium. I didn't pace like Bradford had. I just stood there at my table, hands resting on my yellow legal pad, and I spoke quietly enough that the whole room had to lean in to hear me. Your Honor, my husband says this case is straightforward. He says he built everything alone. He says I'm just noise. I paused. He's counting on you to believe that. He's counting on everyone in this room to look at me, a 62-year-old black woman with no law degree, and assume I don't know what I'm talking about. Bradford started to stand. Your Honor, Judge Price held up a hand. Let her finish. I kept going. Georgia law requires complete financial disclosure in a divorce. Full transparency. Both parties have to show every asset, every account, every trust. I picked up my legal pad, not because I needed to read from it, but because I wanted them to see how steady my hands were. What's been filed in this case isn't complete, Your Honor. There's a trust called the Clearwater Family Trust. It's structured as an irrevocable vehicle with layered beneficiaries. Based on the records I have, it holds approximately $34 million. I looked right at Bradford. It doesn't appear anywhere in Mr. Thompson's disclosures. For half a second, just half a second, no one moved. Not Bradford, not Reggie, not even the court reporter. Then Judge Price leaned forward, and her voice dropped into a register I recognized from 40 years of nursing. The tone a doctor uses when they realize a patient's symptoms are worse than they thought. Mrs. Green, she said slowly, that's a serious allegation. I know, Your Honor. Bradford shot to his feet like he'd been stung. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of reckless speculation I warned about. Mrs. Green has no such evidence. She's fabricating. Mr. Hayes. Judge Price's voice cut through his like a scalpel. Sit down. He sat. She turned back to me, and for the first time that morning, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't pity or frustration. It was interest. Mrs. Green, do you have proof? I reached into my $12 briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Already marked. Already clean. Yes, Your Honor. I'd like this marked as Exhibit 1. I handed it to the bailiff. Bradford took his copy like it might explode. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched, really watched, as his expression shifted from condescension to calculation. It was a wire transfer confirmation. $7 million. Moving from Thompson Logistics operating accounts to an entity called Clearwater Holdings, LLC, with dates, routing numbers, authorization codes. All of it pulled from that convenient little family backup system my husband had set up. Bradford looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd walked into that courtroom, he wasn't smiling. Judge Price took her copy, read it again. Then she looked at Bradford with an expression that could freeze water. Mr. Hayes, she said, voice cold and precise. You'll respond to this. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, we haven't authenticated this document. We have serious concerns about how Mrs. Green obtained— You'll have your chance, Judge Price interrupted. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Green, continue. I felt the room shift. Not toward me exactly, but toward the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the punchline they'd all expected. I didn't press harder. Not yet. I'd learned from 40 years of nursing. You don't dump all the medication into the IV at once. You titrate. You watch. You wait for the body to respond. I sat back down at my table, picked up my plastic cup of water, and took a sip. Across the aisle, I could see Reggie leaning toward Bradford, whispering something urgent. Devin Carter, sitting in the front row behind them, had gone pale. And Jasmine? Jasmine wasn't chewing her gum anymore. She was staring at me with something that looked a lot like confusion, because none of them could figure out how a poor, old black nurse with no lawyer had just produced a document that shouldn't exist. Judge Price called a 15-minute recess. As people filed out, I stayed in my seat. I didn't need to stretch my legs or use the bathroom. I needed them to watch me sit there, calm, unbothered, like I had a whole briefcase full of bombs just waiting to go off. Because I did. I just wasn't ready to detonate them yet. The courtroom felt different that second morning. When I walked in, conversation stopped mid-sentence. People who'd been laughing yesterday now watched me with something between curiosity and caution, like I was a dog they'd thought was toothless that had just shown fangs. Bradford Hayes didn't smile when I passed his table. Reggie didn't laugh. He sat rigid, jaw tight, whispering to Bradford in that urgent way rich men whisper when they realize their money might not be enough. Judge Price took the bench at exactly 9 o'clock. She was the kind of punctual that meant she expected everyone else to be, too. Mr. Hayes, she said, not looking up from her notes, you may call your first witness. Bradford stood, smoothed his tie. The respondent calls Mr. Devin Carter. I'd been waiting for this. Devin Carter walked to the witness stand like a man heading to his own execution. He wore a navy suit, crisp white shirt, gold cufflinks. His shoes were shined to a mirror finish. Everything about him said success, competence, control. But his eyes? His eyes were tired. Devin had been Reggie's best friend since Morehouse College. They'd pledged the same fraternity, started the business together, been best man at each other's weddings. For 12 years, Devin had been a fixture in our home. Sunday dinners, holiday parties, barbecues in the backyard. He'd called me Aunt Lana, even though we weren't blood. He'd asked my advice about his daughter's college applications. I'd made him sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving. The bailiff swore him in, and Devin sat down, hands folded carefully in his lap. Bradford approached with practiced ease. Mr. Carter, you're the Chief Financial Officer of Thompson Logistics Solutions, correct? Yes, sir. And in that role, you oversee the company's financial records, accounting practices, and regulatory compliance? I do. Are you familiar with the Clearwater Family Trust that Mrs. Green referenced yesterday? Devin's jaw flexed. Just once, barely visible. But I saw it. I've heard the name mentioned, he said carefully. Bradford nodded like this was exactly the answer he expected. But it's not part of Thompson Logistics' corporate structure? No, sir. And would you say the company's books are accurate and compliant with all applicable regulations? Yes, we're audited annually by Ernst & Young. Everything is documented, legitimate, and above board. Bradford smiled. No hidden accounts? No offshore schemes? No shadowy trusts concealing marital assets? No, sir. None. Thank you, Mr. Carter. No further questions. Bradford sat down with the satisfied air of a man who'd just sealed a victory. Judge Price looked at me. Mrs. Green, your witness. I stood slowly, picked up my yellow legal pad, not because I needed it, but because I wanted Devin to see me looking at it. Wanted him to wonder what I'd written there. I walked toward the witness stand, but not too close. I'd learned in nursing that sometimes the most important conversations happen at a comfortable distance. Good morning, Devin. He blinked at the informality. Mrs. Green. How long have we known each other? Bradford started to rise. Your Honor? Relevance? I'll allow it, Judge Price said. Answer the question, Mr. Carter. Devin cleared his throat. About 12 years, since you married Reggie. And you've been to my home many times. Yes, ma'am. You've eaten at my table. You've sat in my living room. You've told me about your struggles with your ex-wife, your worries about your daughter. I've listened. I've given you advice, haven't I? His voice got quieter. Yes, ma'am. I let that sit for a moment. Let the jury that didn't exist, because this wasn't a jury trial, feel the weight of betrayal. So you know I'm not the kind of woman who makes wild accusations. You know I'm not dramatic or paranoid or prone to fantasy. Devin's eyes flicked to Reggie, then back to me. You've always been level-headed. Level-headed, I repeated like I was tasting the word. That's kind of you. I took one step closer. Devin, do you remember the toast you gave at our wedding reception? He froze, completely still, like a deer catching a scent. I bet it was a long time ago. Not that long, I said gently. April 2012, the Biltmore Ballroom. You stood up during dinner, raised your glass, and you said, I didn't need to look at my notes. You said, Reggie, my brother, you finally found someone who sees you for who you really is. Devin's throat worked. I may have said something like that. Not are, is, who you really is. I paused. That's grammatically incorrect, Devin, and you're an educated man. Morehouse graduate, CFO of a multi-million-dollar company. But in that moment, you dropped your corporate voice. You spoke like you were back in the dorm room, like you were talking to your real brother, not your business partner. Bradford was on his feet. Your Honor, I fail to see. You will, I said, still looking at Devin. You said Reggie finally found someone who sees him for who he really is, not who he pretends to be, who he really is. Devin's fingers tightened on the armrest. What did you mean by that, Devin? Silence. What was Reggie pretending to be that he needed someone to see past? I don't remember the context. You don't remember your best friend's wedding toast? Mrs. Green, did you mean that I saw past his money, past his success, or did you mean something else? Bradford's voice rose. Objection. Argumentative. Judge Price looked at me over her glasses. Mrs. Green, do you have a specific question? I nodded. Devin, when you said that toast, did you know Reggie was lying to me about something? The room went still. Devin's eyes widened. No, I didn't say that. But you knew he was hiding something. Something about who he really was. Your Honor! Bradford was almost shouting now. Judge Price held up a hand. Mr. Carter, answer yes or no. Did you have knowledge that Mr. Thompson was concealing material information from Mrs. Green at the time of their marriage? Devin looked at Reggie, then at Bradford, then at his own hands. I knew Trevor wasn't dead, he said quietly. The words dropped like a stone into water. Judge Price leaned forward. Excuse me? Devin's voice was barely above a whisper. Reggie's son, Trevor, from his first marriage. Reggie told Lana he died in a car accident in 2017, but Trevor's alive. He's been alive this whole time. I didn't react, didn't gasp or cry or look triumphant. I just nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something I already knew, because I had. And where is Trevor now, Devin? Grand Cayman. Doing what? Devin closed his eyes. Managing offshore accounts. For his father? Yes. Including the Clearwater Family Trust? Yes. Bradford was standing, but he wasn't objecting anymore. He was staring at his client with dawning horror. I turned to Judge Price. No further questions why Judge Price looked like a woman who'd just realized she was dealing with something much bigger than a simple divorce. Mr. Hayes, she said, voice sharp as a scalpel. Do you need a moment to confer with your client? Bradford's face had gone from confident to calculating to something close to panic. Your Honor, I'd request a brief recess to... Denied. Sit down. He sat. Judge Price turned to Devin, who looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Mr. Carter, let me be very clear. This is a civil proceeding, but if your testimony suggests criminal activity, you may be compelled to answer questions you'd rather not. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. And you're stating under oath that Mr. Thompson deliberately lied to his current wife about the death of his son for the purpose of concealing assets? Devin's voice cracked. I don't know if that was the purpose, Your Honor. I just know Trevor's alive, and Reggie told Lana he wasn't. Judge Price made a note. Then she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or wariness. Mrs. Green, I assume you have documentation to support Mr. Carter's testimony? I pulled another sheet from my briefcase. Yes, Your Honor. This is a copy of Trevor Thompson's passport, issued in 2019. The photo and signature are visible. Also his residential address in Georgetown, Grand Cayman, and his registered business, Clearwater Holdings, LLC, where he's listed as managing director. I handed it to the bailiff. Bradford didn't even look at his copy. He just sat there, pale, gripping the edge of the table. Reggie, for the first time since this started, looked scared. Judge Price studied the document. Where did you obtain this, Mrs. Green? From my husband's personal email, Your Honor, backed up to our home server. Trevor sent his father a birthday card last year, with a return address. The judge set the paper down carefully. Mr. Hayes, does your client wish to address this? Bradford stood, but his smoothness was gone. Your Honor, we'd need time to verify the authenticity. I'm not asking if it's authentic, Judge Price interrupted. I'm asking if your client would like to explain why he told his wife his son was dead when the son is in fact alive and managing his offshore accounts. Reggie stood abruptly. She's twisting everything. Trevor and I are estranged. I didn't want Lana to know about him because it's painful. Sit down, Mr. Thompson, Judge Price said, not loudly, but with such authority that Reggie dropped back into his chair like a child. She looked at me. Continue, Mrs. Green. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. I just moved to the next piece. Your Honor, the Clearwater Family Trust currently holds $34 million in liquid assets. The trust document lists Trevor as beneficiary, but the funding source is Thompson Logistics Solutions operating revenue, transferred between 2018 and 2023. I placed another exhibit on the table. These are the transfer records, $7 million here, $10 million there, each one labeled consulting fees or contract services. But there's no corresponding service agreement, no deliverables, no actual consulting work. Bradford found his voice. Those are legitimate business expenses. Then produce the contracts, I said, turning to look at him directly. Show me what Trevor Thompson's company provided in exchange for $17 million over 5 years. Bradford's mouth opened. closed. Judge Price's expression had gone from stern to something harder. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to ask your client one question, and he's going to answer it truthfully, or I'm going to hold him in contempt." "Mr. Thompson, stand up." Reggie stood, and for the first time, he didn't look like the powerful CEO. He looked like a man in quicksand. "Did you create the Clearwater Family Trust for the purpose of concealing marital assets from your wife?" Reggie's lawyer's instincts kicked in. "Your Honor, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right." "This is a civil proceeding, Mr. Thompson. You can invoke that right, but I can draw adverse inferences from your silence. So I'll ask again. Did you create this trust to hide money from Mrs. Green?" Reggie looked at Bradford, who gave the tiniest shake of his head. "Your Honor, on advice of counsel, I decline to answer." Judge Price wrote something down, and the scratch of her pen sounded like a judge's gavel. "Noted. Mrs. Green, anything else?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to address the matter of employee pension funds." I didn't call another witness right away. I just placed a stack of papers on the projection screen. "Your Honor, Thompson Logistics Solutions employs approximately 430 people: drivers, warehouse staff, dispatchers, mechanics. Most of them participate in the company 401k plan. Contributions are deducted from their paychecks every 2 weeks. I pulled up the first document. "This is a payroll report from January 2022. You can see the deductions column here, amounts taken from employee paychecks for retirement savings." Judge Price leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "And this," I continued, placing the next page, "is the custodial account statement for the same period, showing what was actually deposited into the retirement fund." The numbers didn't match. They weren't even close. In January 2022 alone, employees had $187,000 deducted from their paychecks, but only $141,000 was deposited into the retirement account. The difference is $46,000. I flipped to the next page. February 2022, same pattern. Deductions, $192,000. Deposits, $145,000. Difference, $47,000. Page after page, month after month. Over 3 years, Your Honor, the gap totals $2.3 million. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning hum. "Now, it's possible this is a bookkeeping error," I said, though my tone made it clear I didn't believe that. "It's possible the money went somewhere else by accident." I paused. "But it's also possible that the money was diverted, intentionally, to make up for the funds being funneled into the Clearwater Trust." Judge Price's face had gone from stern to genuinely angry. "Mrs. Green, do you have evidence of intent?" "I have a witness, Your Honor." "Call them." I turned to the back of the courtroom. I call Sharon Mitchell. The woman who walked down the aisle was 61 years old, black, solid, with the kind of presence that comes from decades of hard work. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes. Her hair was gray and natural, pulled back in a bun. Sharon had worked at Thompson Logistics for 23 years, started as a loader, worked her way up to warehouse supervisor. She'd seen 3 recessions, 4 CEOs before Reggie took over from his father, and more corporate restructurings than she could count. She took the stand, was sworn in, and looked at me with eyes that said, "I trust you. Don't let me down." "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," I said gently. "Good morning, Mrs. Green." "How long have you worked for Thompson Logistics?" 23 years this November." "And you participate in the company 401k plan?" "Yes, ma'am. Have since the beginning. 10% of every paycheck." "Do you check your statements regularly?" Sharon nodded. "Every quarter. I'm planning to retire in 3 years. That money's all I got besides Social Security." "And did you notice anything unusual about your statements?" Her jaw tightened. "About 2 years ago, I started seeing the numbers weren't adding up. I'd look at my paycheck, see the deduction, then look at my retirement balance, and it'd be less than it should be." "What did you do?" "I brought it to my manager, showed him the math. He said he'd look into it." "And did he?" "No, ma'am. 2 weeks later, I got written up for creating a hostile work environment. Month after that, I got demoted from supervisor back to floor staff." Sharon's voice didn't waver, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. 23 years of loyalty, and this is what it bought her. "Did you keep tracking the discrepancies?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm good with numbers. I kept every pay stub, every statement. I made spreadsheets. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do about it. I approached the bench. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Ms. Mitchell's personal records as evidence. 3 years of pay stubs cross-referenced with retirement account statements. Judge Price accepted the documents, flipped through them. Her expression grew darker with every page. Mitchell, I said, turning back to Sharon, why didn't you report this to the Department of Labor or hire a lawyer? Sharon's laugh was bitter. Mrs. Green, I'm a 61-year-old black woman who makes $18 an hour. I can't afford a lawyer, and I was scared if I made noise I'd lose my job completely. I got bills. I got a grandbaby with special needs I helped take care of. I couldn't risk it. So you stayed silent until you posted on Facebook that you were going through a divorce with Mr. Thompson. Sharon looked at me directly. That's when I reached out, because I figured if he was doing this to you, his wife, then maybe you'd believe me about what he was doing to us. The weight of that statement filled the courtroom. I let it sit there for a moment. Then, no further questions. Bradford stood for cross-examination, but he looked like a man who knew he was standing in a minefield. Sus, Mitchell, isn't it possible you simply miscalculated? That you don't understand how 401k contributions and market fluctuations work? Sharon looked at him with the patience of a woman who'd been underestimated her entire life. Mr. Hayes, I've been balancing checkbooks and managing inventory for 23 years. I know the difference between a market loss and missing deposits. These weren't fluctuations. These were deductions that never arrived. Bradford tried a different angle. You were demoted, you said. Isn't it possible you're simply a disgruntled employee trying to— I was demoted for asking questions, Sharon interrupted. And if that makes me disgruntled, then yes, sir, I guess I am. Bradford had nothing. He sat down. Judge Price looked at the documents in front of her, then at Reggie, and her voice went cold. Mr. Thompson, these are serious allegations. If even a fraction of this is true, we're not just talking about divorce anymore. We're talking about federal crimes. Reggie stood. Your Honor, I personally oversee— Sit down, she snapped. I don't want to hear from you right now. She turned to me. Mrs. Green, I'm ordering a forensic audit of Thompson Logistics payroll and retirement accounts, effective immediately. The company is hereby restricted from making any transfers over $10,000 without court approval. She banged her gavel. We're taking a 30-minute recess. When we return, Mr. Hayes, your client better have some answers. When court reconvened, Bradford Hayes looked like he'd aged 5 years in 30 minutes. He stood slowly, like a man walking to the gallows. Your Honor, before Mrs. Green continues, the respondent would like to submit a sworn affidavit from Dr. Patricia Williams, a licensed psychiatrist who has knowledge of Mrs. Green's mental health history. My stomach clenched, but I kept my face neutral. This was the move I'd been expecting. When rich men can't win on facts, they attack credibility. And the easiest way to destroy a woman's credibility is to call her crazy. Bradford handed the document to the bailiff. Dr. Williams' statement indicates that Mrs. Green has exhibited signs of paranoid ideation, obsessive behavior, and delusional thinking. Given the extraordinary allegations Mrs. Green has made, we believe the court should consider whether her mental state is affecting her judgment. Judge Price read the affidavit, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Green, do you know Dr. Patricia Williams? Yes, Your Honor. She's a psychiatrist I saw twice in 2023. And did you exhibit the behaviors described in this affidavit? I stood. Your Honor, may I call Dr. Williams to the stand? Bradford's head snapped up. She's not available. She's in the building, I said calmly. I subpoenaed her yesterday. The look on Bradford's face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent preparing for this moment. Judge Price's eyebrows rose. You subpoenaed her? Yes, Your Honor, because I knew this was coming. Bailiff, is Dr. Williams present? The bailiff checked the hallway. Yes, Your Honor. Bring her in. Dr. Patricia Williams entered the courtroom like a woman walking to her own execution. She was a black woman in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a cream pantsuit. Normally, she had the kind of confidence that comes with decades of education and professional success. But today she looked exhausted, haunted. She took the stand, was sworn in, and sat down with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. I approached slowly, keeping my voice gentle. Dr. Williams, do you know me? Yes. Her voice was barely audible. Did you treat me as a patient? We had 2 sessions, in March 2023. What did we discuss in those sessions? She hesitated. You were struggling with suspicions about your husband. You were having trouble sleeping. You felt isolated. Did I exhibit paranoid delusions? A long pause. No. Judge Price leaned forward. Dr. Williams, speak up, please. Dr. Williams raised her voice, but it shook. No, she did not exhibit paranoid delusions. Did I exhibit obsessive behavior? No. Then why? I asked, keeping my tone gentle, not accusatory. Does your affidavit say that I did? Tears sprang to Dr. Williams' eyes. She looked at Reggie, then at Bradford, then at me. I'm sorry, she whispered. Dr. Williams, Judge Price said, voice sharp. Answer the question. Why does your sworn statement contradict what you're saying now? The doctor's composure cracked completely. Because I was paid to write it. The courtroom erupted. Bradford shot to his feet. Reggie started to stand. Judge Price banged her gavel 3 times. Order! Everyone sit down. Dr. Williams, explain yourself. Dr. Williams was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Last month, Mr. Thompson contacted me. He said he needed documentation of his wife's mental instability for divorce proceedings. He offered me $50,000. And you took it? Judge Price's voice could have frozen fire. I have debts. Student loans from my daughter's medical school. A mortgage I'm behind on. I was desperate. She looked at me. Mrs. Green, I'm so sorry. You came to me for help, and I— Dr. Williams, I interrupted gently. When did you decide to tell the truth? She wiped her eyes. 3 days after I sent the affidavit, you sent me a letter. It contained copies of the Clearwater Trust documents, the payroll discrepancies, everything. You wrote that you understood desperation, but that if I testified falsely, I'd lose more than my license. I'd lose my soul. She took a shaky breath. You gave me a choice. You said I could tell the truth now, or live with the lie forever. And you were right. I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy you to save myself. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just said, Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Williams. Judge Price was furious. Dr. Williams, you understand you've just admitted to accepting money in exchange for false testimony? Your license will be suspended pending a full investigation. I know, Your Honor. I'm prepared for that. Judge Price turned to Bradford. Mr. Hayes, did you know this affidavit was purchased? Absolutely not, Your Honor. Because if I find out you did, you'll be joining Dr. Williams in front of the state bar. Bradford went pale. Your Honor, I had no knowledge. Get out of my sight, Judge Price said quietly. All of you, we're done for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. And Mr. Thompson, you better pray I don't refer this to the U.S. Attorney before then. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was anxious, because I was waiting. I sat in my small rental apartment, the one bedroom I'd moved into after Reggie locked me out, with my laptop open, monitoring the bank accounts I still had access to through that home server. At 11:47 p.m., I saw it. A transaction pending. $85,000. Transferred from one of Reggie's personal accounts to American Airlines. 2 first-class tickets. Atlanta to Miami. Miami to Georgetown, Grand Cayman. Departing tomorrow night at 11:45 p.m. Passengers, Reginald Thompson and Jasmine Brooks. I took a screenshot. Saved it. Emailed it to myself. Printed 3 copies. Then I went to bed and slept like a baby. October 20th, 2024, when I walked into court that morning, I moved differently. Not rushed, not nervous. I walked like a woman who'd just drawn a royal flush and was waiting for the right moment to lay down her cards. Bradford saw it. His eyes narrowed. Reggie saw it. He whispered something to Jasmine, who'd shown up again despite everything, still wearing those diamond earrings. Judge Price took the bench, looking like she hadn't slept either. Mrs. Green, before we continue, do you have any additional matters to raise? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to address the issue of flight risk. Bradford frowned. Your Honor, that's absurd. My client has a business to run, a home here. Your client, I interrupted, walking to the evidence table, purchased 2 first-class tickets to Grand Cayman, departing tonight at 11:45 p.m. I placed the boarding passes on the projector. The courtroom went silent. 2 tickets, one for Reginald Thompson, one for Jasmine Brooks, one way. Judge Price's face went from tired to furious in 3 seconds. Mr. Thompson, stand up. Reggie stood slowly, and for the first time he looked genuinely afraid. "Were you planning to leave the country during active divorce proceedings?" "Your Honor, it's a business trip. One-way tickets?" "I haven't decided when I'm coming back. To a country where your son manages your hidden assets? Where there's no extradition treaty for financial crimes?" Reggie's mouth opened, closed. Judge Price turned to the bailiff. "Bailiff, collect Mr. Thompson's passport. Now." "Your Honor," Bradford tried, "this is highly irregular." "So is fleeing the jurisdiction," Judge Price snapped. "Mr. Thompson, you are hereby restricted from leaving the state of Georgia. Ms. Brooks, where are you?" Jasmine stood up in the gallery, looking terrified. "Here, Your Honor." "Same applies to you. Surrender your passport." "But I didn't do anything." "You accepted stolen jewelry, participated in an affair with a married man, and apparently planned to flee to the Caymans. Your passport. Now." 2 court officers collected both passports. Judge Price looked at me. "Mrs. Green, is there anything else?" This was the moment I'd been building toward for 2 years. I could feel it, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Everyone watching, everyone waiting. "Your Honor," I said slowly, "I'd like to request a brief recess." My children were waiting outside the courtroom. Jerome in his teacher clothes, khakis and a button-down. Aaliyah in scrubs from her nursing shift. They rushed over when they saw me. "Mom, oh my God, you're killing him in there," Jerome said, trying to hug me. I held up a hand, stopped him, looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then I said the words I'd been holding inside for 2 years. "Baby, I knew about Jasmine 2 years ago." Jerome froze. "What?" Aaliyah's eyes went wide. "Mama, what are you talking about?" I kept my voice low, calm. The same voice I used to use when explaining a terminal diagnosis to a family. "I knew about the affair. I knew about the trust. I knew about Trevor being alive. I knew about the pension theft. I've known everything for 2 years." Silence. Then Jerome. But why didn't you?" "Because if I'd confronted him then, I'd have gotten half the marital assets in a quiet settlement. $75,000, maybe $100. And he'd have kept doing what he was doing. To the next woman, to his employees, to everyone." Aaliyah's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama, are you saying—" "I'm saying I let him think he was destroying me. I let him cut off my money. I let him laugh at me in court. I let him try to call me crazy." I looked at both of them. "Because powerful men make mistakes when they think they've already won." Jerome sat down hard on the hallway bench. "The backup server. You said he set it up." "I set it up," I corrected. 3 years ago. I convinced him it was his idea. "Honey, what if something happens and we lose all our photos? Shouldn't we have everything backed up?" He thought he was humoring me. "The documents you've been presenting," Aaliyah said, realization dawning. "You didn't just find them. I've been collecting them, organizing them, cross-referencing them for 2 years." "Sharon Mitchell?" Jerome asked. "I reached out to her 18 months ago. I saw her Facebook post about her grandbaby and messaged her. Started asking questions about the company. When she told me about the retirement fund, I knew I had the criminal angle I needed." Aaliyah put her hand over her mouth. "Dr. Williams?" I allowed myself a small smile. I knew he'd try the mental health angle. It's what men like him always do. So 3 days before he contacted her, I sent her copies of everything I had. When he offered her money, she panicked and called me. Everything she said in there, we rehearsed it. The tears were real, but the surprise wasn't. Jerome stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mom, you've been running this whole thing?" "For 2 years, baby. Every piece, every witness, every document." "Does anyone else know?" "Just us, and it needs to stay that way." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, why? Why didn't you just leave?" I reached out, took both their hands. "Baby girl, I spent 40 years as a nurse. 40 years watching doctors take credit for my work. Watching rich patients lie to get what they wanted. Watching the system protect people with money while people like Sharon Mitchell got crushed." I squeezed their hands. "I learned how to be invisible, how to be underestimated, how to smile and nod and say yes, doctor, while keeping perfect records of every mistake they made. Because one day," I continued, "one day the records would matter. One day someone would finally ask to see the chart. And when they did, I wanted it to be complete." Jerome wiped his eyes. So when you asked for the divorce, I baited him for months. I questioned his late nights just enough to make him defensive. I accidentally found one receipt from a dinner with Jasmine, one I'd known about for a year. I pushed until he felt cornered, until he felt like he had to file first to maintain control. And when he locked you out financially, Aaliyah said, you knew he would. I counted on it, because that's what men like him do. They use money as a weapon, and I needed him to do it publicly, in a way the court would see. I looked at my children, my beautiful, smart, struggling children who'd offered to help me pay for a lawyer, and I felt my heart crack open. I'm 62 years old. I've spent my whole life being dismissed, overlooked, underpaid, and underestimated. And I used it. Every bit of it. Because when people think you're not a threat, I said, they tell you everything. Jerome pulled me into a hug, and Aaliyah joined, and we stood there in that courthouse hallway, 3 generations of Black resilience, holding each other. Does he know yet? Jerome asked. Does Reggie know you planned this? I pulled back, wiped my eyes, checked my watch. Not yet, but he's about to. When I walked back into that courtroom, I wasn't the same woman who'd walked in 3 days ago. No, that's not quite right. I was exactly the same woman. I'd just stopped pretending to be anything less. Judge Price took the bench, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew something had shifted. Judges don't get to where they are by missing subtext. Mrs. Green, she said, and there was something different in her voice. Not pity, not frustration, curiosity. Before we proceed, I need to ask you something directly. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. You've presented a remarkably sophisticated case for someone with no legal training. You've anticipated opposing counsel's moves. You've had witnesses ready. You've produced documents at precisely the right moments. She leaned forward. How did you know where to look? The courtroom went silent. Everyone leaning forward. Everyone waiting. This was it. The moment where I could keep playing the role of the lucky amateur who stumbled into evidence. Or I could tell the truth. I chose the truth. Your Honor, I've spent 40 years as a nurse, and the first thing they teach you in nursing school is documentation. If it isn't charted, it didn't happen. If you don't write it down, no one will believe you when something goes wrong. I picked up my worn legal pad. When I married Reggie 12 years ago, I kept records. Not because I didn't trust him, because I'm careful. I noted dates, conversations, financial decisions, little things, normal things. Judge Price nodded slowly. And when did that change? March 15th, 2023. That's when I found the first credit card statement with Jasmine Brooks' name on it. I didn't look at Reggie. Didn't need to. I could feel him staring at me. I didn't confront him that day. I'm a nurse, Your Honor. When you find one symptom, you don't diagnose immediately. You assess. You look for patterns. You run tests. So you investigated, Judge Price said. I accessed the home backup server my husband had installed. Everything was there. Emails, financial records, corporate documents, all synced automatically because he wanted the convenience of accessing his files from anywhere. Bradford started to stand. Your Honor, that's an invasion of— Sit down, Mr. Hayes, Judge Price said without looking at him. Mrs. Green had every legal right to access a shared household system. Continue, Mrs. Green. I found the affair. I found the hidden trust. I found Trevor, alive and managing accounts in Grand Cayman. I found the pension discrepancies. I paused, and I realized that if I confronted my husband then, I'd get a settlement and he'd keep doing what he was doing. To someone else. To his employees. Forever. So you waited, Judge Price said. I documented. For 2 years. I organized. I cross-referenced. I verified. And yes, Your Honor, I planned. The words hung in the air like smoke. I reached out to Sharon Mitchell because I saw her Facebook posts about her grandbaby and knew she worked for Thompson Logistics. I asked questions. She told me about the retirement fund discrepancies. I had her keep every document. I looked at Dr. Williams, who sat in the gallery, watching me with red-rimmed eyes. When I went to Dr. Williams for therapy, it was real. I was struggling. I was angry and scared, and I couldn't sleep. But I also knew my husband would try to use my mental health against me. So 3 days before he contacted her, I sent her copies of everything I'd found. When he offered her money to lie, she called me. We made a choice together. She'd take his money, then tell the truth. Judge Price's expression was unreadable. You orchestrated witness testimony? I ensured a witness would tell the truth under oath, Your Honor. Dr. Williams never lied on that stand. She told the truth about being pressured and paid. The only lie was the affidavit she originally signed, and that lie was my husband's, not mine. I took a breath. And when I confronted Reggie about the affair last year, I did it knowing he'd react exactly the way he did. Because men like him, when cornered, they attack. They cut off money. They try to make you look crazy. They try to make you disappear. So you let him, Judge Price said slowly. I let him think he was succeeding. I let him lock me out of accounts I'd already documented. I let him hire expensive lawyers while I went to the law library. I let him laugh at me in court while I filed motions he didn't expect. I finally looked at Reggie. His face had gone from confident to pale to something that looked like recognition, like he was finally seeing me for the first time. I let him underestimate me, Your Honor, because being underestimated is only a weakness if you don't know how to use it. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Judge Price leaned back in her chair, studying me. Mrs. Green, what you're describing sounds like entrapment. It's not entrapment when the person has already committed the crimes, Your Honor. I didn't make my husband steal from his employees. I didn't make him hide assets. I didn't make him fake his son's death. I just made sure that when he did those things, someone was watching. Someone was documenting. Someone was building a case, Bradford said bitterly from his table. I turned to him. Someone was ensuring justice, Mr. Hayes, because without documentation, without evidence, without a plan, I'd be just another divorced woman with nothing. And those 430 workers would never see their retirement money again. Judge Price was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of 30 years on the bench. Mrs. Green, I've presided over thousands of cases. I've seen every kind of divorce, every kind of deception, but I've never seen anyone do what you just did. She paused, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. My stomach dropped. Had I miscalculated? Had I gone too far? However, Judge Price continued, nothing you did was illegal. Clever? Absolutely. Calculated? Without question. But you had every right to access shared household systems, every right to document your spouse's activities, and every right to organize your evidence. She looked at Reggie. What I find remarkable, Mr. Thompson, is that you committed every action Mrs. Green documented. You stole from employees. You hid assets. You attempted to bribe a medical professional. You tried to flee the jurisdiction. Those are your choices, your crimes. Her gavel hand twitched. Mrs. Green simply made sure someone was keeping score. Judge Price straightened her papers, and I knew that whatever came next would change everything. Based on the evidence presented, I'm making the following orders effective immediately. Bradford grabbed a pen. Reggie's hands gripped the table. First, asset division. Mrs. Green is awarded 60% of all marital assets, including but not limited to the primary residence, investment accounts, and all equity interests in Thompson Logistics Solutions acquired during the marriage. The Clearwater Family Trust is to be dissolved immediately, with all assets repatriated to the United States and subject to division. Reggie made a sound, not quite a gasp, more like air leaving a punctured tire. Second, the pension fund. Mr. Thompson is ordered to restore the full amount of missing employee retirement contributions, $2.3 million plus interest and penalties, within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges and potential criminal prosecution. Sharon Mitchell, sitting in the gallery, started crying. Not sad tears, relief tears. Third, company oversight. Thompson Logistics Solutions is hereby placed under independent receivership pending a full forensic audit. Mr. Thompson may continue operational duties, but all financial decisions over $10,000 require receiver approval. Bradford shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's tantamount to removing my client from his own company. Your client stole from his employees, Mr. Hayes. He's lucky I'm not removing him entirely. She turned back to her notes. Fourth, criminal referral. I am referring this matter to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. The evidence suggests violations of ERISA, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Reggie's lawyer mask finally cracked. Your Honor, please. I'm not finished. Judge Price's voice could have cut glass. Fifth, restraining order. Mr. Thompson is prohibited from contacting Mrs. Green directly or indirectly, from harassing or intimidating any witnesses, and from disposing of any assets not explicitly approved by this court. She looked directly at Reggie. Mr. Thompson, do you understand these orders? He stood slowly, and for the first time since I'd known him, Reginald Thompson looked like what he really was, a man who'd built an empire on lies and watched it crumble because one woman knew how to keep receipts. Yes, Your Honor, he said, voice hollow. Good. She raised her gavel. We're adjourned. The gavel fell, and it sounded like thunder. But the story didn't end there. Because just as everyone started to stand, just as Bradford began gathering his papers with shaking hands, just as Reggie turned to leave, the courtroom doors opened. 6 people walked in. Dark suits, federal badges. The lead agent, a black woman in her 40s with steel in her eyes, walked straight to Reggie. Reginald Thompson? Reggie turned, confused. Yes? I'm Special Agent Monica Reeves, FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. She pulled out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. The courtroom erupted. Bradford started shouting about warrants. Jasmine Brooks screamed. Devin Carter, sitting in the front row, put his head in his hands. And me? I sat down slowly in my chair, picked up my plastic cup of water, and took a sip, because I'd known they were coming. I'd called the FBI myself 2 weeks ago and provided them with copies of everything. Every document, every transaction, every lie. The Miranda rights echoed through the courtroom as they cuffed my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, and led him toward the door. As he passed my table, he stopped, looked at me. You did this, he said, not angry, just hollow. You planned all of it. I met his eyes. No, Reggie, you did this. I just made sure someone was taking notes. They led him away. The courtroom slowly emptied. Sharon Mitchell came up to me, grabbed my hands, couldn't speak through her tears. I held her, let her cry. Judge Price called me to the bench after everyone else had left. Mrs. Green, she said quietly, off the record. Yes, Your Honor? What you did. It was legal. Barely. But it was also the most extraordinary act of strategic patience I've seen in 30 years on this bench. I didn't know what to say to that. I hope you're proud, she said. Because you should be. You didn't just win your divorce. You exposed a criminal enterprise. You protected 400 workers. You proved that the system can work when someone is brave enough and smart enough to use it right. Thank you, Your Honor. She smiled, a real smile, not a judicial one. Go home, Mrs. Green. Get some rest. You've earned it. 3 months later, Sharon Mitchell stood in front of 400 employees of Thompson Logistics Solutions in the main warehouse in Macon, Georgia. She wore a navy blazer, new, bought with the first paycheck from her promotion to Director of Employee Relations. The company, under new management, had asked her to lead the restoration of trust with the workforce. Y'all, I'm not gonna lie, she said into the microphone, voice echoing off the high warehouse ceiling. These last few months have been hard. We learned that someone we trusted was stealing from us, was lying to us, was betting on us being too scared or too tired to fight back. The crowd was silent, listening. But I want to introduce you to someone who wasn't too scared, who wasn't too tired, who fought for us when we couldn't fight for ourselves. She gestured to the side of the stage. Mrs. Lana Green. I walked out to applause, real applause, the kind that comes from gratitude, not politeness, and Sharon hugged me hard. Because of this woman, Sharon said, voice breaking. Every penny that was taken from our retirement accounts has been restored, plus interest, plus damages, plus a commitment that it will never happen again. The applause got louder. So I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you, Mrs. Green. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for believing us. Thank you for fighting for us. I took the microphone, looked at all those faces, black, white, Latino, Asian, old, young, tired, hopeful, and I said the only thing that mattered. You deserved better, and now you have it. Don't ever forget what you're worth. Trevor Thompson was extradited from Grand Cayman in December. He cooperated with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges, 5 years probation instead of 20 years in prison. Part of his cooperation meant returning every dollar in the Clearwater Trust and testifying against his father. I never met him in person, but he sent me a letter in January. Mrs. Green, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. My father told me you knew about the trust, that you'd agreed to it, that it was all legal. I was 25 when he set it up. I believed him because he was my father. I know now he lied. About you, about my mother, about everything. Thank you for exposing the truth. I lost my father, but I found my conscience. Trevor, I read it twice, then filed it away. Some apologies you accept. Some you just acknowledge. Dr. Patricia Williams' medical license was suspended for 2 years. She lost her practice, lost most of her clients, lost the respect of her peers, but she didn't lose everything. In March, I got a call from her. Mrs. Green, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I've started volunteering at a women's shelter, offering free counseling to domestic violence survivors. It's the least I can do. I was quiet for a moment. Then, Dr. Williams, I never wanted to destroy you. I wanted you to tell the truth. I know, and I did, and it cost me everything. She paused. But I can sleep now. For the first time in years, I can sleep. Then it was worth it, I said. Jasmine Brooks deleted her Instagram in November, left Atlanta. No forwarding address. No goodbye posts. Just gone. Someone told me she moved to Los Angeles, changed her name, started over. I hope she learned something. I hope she understands that being beautiful and young doesn't protect you when you help powerful men hurt other people. But mostly I just hope she's gone for good. Devin Carter resigned as CFO in December. He avoided criminal charges by cooperating with investigators, but his reputation was destroyed. No Fortune 500 company would touch him. Last I heard, he was working as a financial consultant for small businesses in South Carolina, making a fraction of what he used to make, living quietly. He sent me a text message in February. I'm sorry, Aunt Lana. I should have told you the truth years ago. I was a coward. I never responded. Some betrayals don't deserve acknowledgement. Reggie pled guilty in January to avoid a trial. Wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. 15 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole in 10. Thompson Logistics Solutions was sold to a national competitor. The employees kept their jobs under new management. Reggie's mansion in Buckhead was seized. His cars, his art collection, his watches. Everything. I heard he's housed at FCI Edgefield in South Carolina. Medium security. He works in the prison kitchen. I don't visit. I don't write. I don't think about him much anymore. He's just a case I closed, a chart I completed, a chapter I finished. March 2025, I stood in front of 75 nursing students at Grady Memorial Hospital, the place where I'd worked for 40 years. They'd invited me to speak to the incoming class. Ethical decision-making in healthcare. That's what they called it. But I knew what they really wanted to hear. The room was mostly women, mostly black and brown. Mostly from working-class families who'd scraped together tuition money and taken out loans and worked night shifts to get here. They looked at me the way I used to look at older nurses when I was their age, with hope that someone would tell them the truth about what this job really required. So I did. They teach you in nursing school to follow the chart, I began, my voice steady and clear. Follow the protocol, follow the doctor's orders, and that's important. That saves lives. I paused, looking at their young faces. But they don't teach you the other part. They don't teach you that sometimes the chart is wrong. Sometimes the protocol protects the wrong people. Sometimes the doctors don't know what they're doing. Or worse, they know and they don't care. A few students nodded, recognizing something they'd already sensed but hadn't been allowed to say out loud. I spent 40 years following orders, being the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who didn't make waves. Because that's what you do when you're a black woman in healthcare, right? You keep your head down. You do your job. You don't complain. I stepped closer to them. And you know what I learned? Silence. The people who don't make waves, they're the ones watching. They're the ones who see everything. They're the ones who know where all the bodies are buried, sometimes literally. A nervous laugh rippled through the room. So if someone underestimates you, because of your age, your race, your gender, your degree, your zip code, whatever, let them. Smile. Say yes, ma'am. And yes, sir, keep your head down. I let that sit for a beat. And document everything. More nods, knowing nods. Because one day you'll need to prove what you know. And when that day comes, you won't be begging. You won't be asking permission. You'll be presenting. I picked up the legal pad I'd brought with me, the same one I'd carried into that courtroom 6 months ago. This is evidence. This is power. This is how you fight back when the system tells you to sit down and be grateful for scraps. I held it up. Every shift, write down what you see. Every conversation with a doctor, note the time. Every medication error you catch, document it. Every patient you save because you spoke up, record it. A young black woman in the front row raised her hand. Ms. Green, isn't that adversarial? Aren't we supposed to be team players? I smiled. Baby, you can be a team player, but you can also be the team member who keeps receipts. Because when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, the people with documentation survive. The people without it get blamed. Another hand. But what if keeping records makes people think we don't trust them? Good, I said flatly. You shouldn't trust them. Not blindly. Trust is earned through consistent action, not demanded through hierarchy. I sat on the edge of the desk, let my voice soften. Look, I'm not telling you to be paranoid. I'm not telling you to assume everyone is out to get you. I'm telling you to be smart, to be prepared, to protect yourself in a system that doesn't always protect you. When I was your age, I continued, an older nurse told me, if you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. I thought she meant for legal protection, and she did, but she also meant something deeper. She meant your work matters, your observations matter, your voice matters, but only if you can prove it, only if you write it down, only if you make it undeniable. I stood up, brushed off my slacks. So here's my advice, and it applies to nursing, to life, to everything. Be excellent. Be thorough. Be kind. Be professional. I paused. And be ready, because the world will underestimate you every single day. It will look at you and make assumptions about what you're capable of, what you're worth, what you know. And you can fight those assumptions with anger. You can fight them with tears. You can fight them with righteous speeches about fairness and equality. Or, I said, letting the word hang in the air, you can smile, take notes, build your case. And when the moment comes, when someone finally asks to see the receipts, you pull out a filing cabinet. The students laughed, but it was a knowing laugh, an empowered laugh. They laughed at me when I walked into that courtroom, a 62-year-old black woman, no lawyer, no money, no chance. I picked up my briefcase, that same $12 thrift store briefcase. But I had something better than a lawyer. I had documentation. I had patience. I had a plan. And most importantly, I had stopped asking permission to fight back. The room was silent now, everyone leaning forward. You're going to face moments in your career, in your life, where someone with more power, more money, more letters after their name tries to make you feel small, tries to make you doubt what you saw, what you know, what you're worth. When that happens, remember this. Being underestimated is not a weakness. I let the words land. It's a weapon. And if you're smart enough, patient enough, thorough enough, it's the sharpest weapon you'll ever have. After the talk, after the students had left, after the dean had thanked me and the faculty had shaken my hand, I walked through the hallways of Grady Memorial one more time. Past the nurses' station where I'd spent thousands of hours. Past the supply closet where I used to cry on the really bad days. Past the break room where I'd eaten 10,000 lunches. It looked exactly the same, but I saw it differently now. I wasn't invisible here anymore. Nurses I didn't know nodded to me in the hallways, whispered, "That's her." Not with pity, with respect, some even with awe. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd done what needed to be done because no one else would. People ask me if I feel guilty, if I manipulated Reggie, if I'm just as bad as he is. Here's what I know. I gave that man 12 years. I loved him, really loved him. I made his life comfortable. I supported his business. I smiled at his friends. I played the role of the grateful wife who'd married up. And he repaid me by stealing from working people, by lying about his son, by trying to have me declared insane so he could take everything and leave me with nothing. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. I just made sure there was a record. Would I do it again? Pause, in a heartbeat. Because I'm done asking permission to fight back. I'm done being quiet. I'm done accepting that the way things are is the way things have to be. I spent 62 years being underestimated, being overlooked, being dismissed. And I used every single second of it to learn, to watch, to document, because that's what nurses do. We keep the charts, we note the changes, we catch the errors, we sound the alarm when something's wrong. And when everyone asks, "How did you know?" we show them. We show them the receipts. I walk through the hospital lobby, head high, shoulders back. A young black nurse, can't be more than 25, approaches nervously. "Ms. Green, I just wanted to say..." "What you did?" "It mattered." "It matters, thank you." I take her hand, squeeze it gently. "Baby, don't thank me. Just remember the lesson." "What lesson?" I smile, a real smile, warm and knowing. That being a 62-year-old black woman isn't a disadvantage. It's a cover story. She laughs. I laugh. We part ways. And as I push through the hospital doors into the bright Atlanta sunshine, I think about all the women out there right now. The ones working jobs where they're undervalued. The ones in marriages where they're unappreciated. The ones told they're too old, too much, too loud, too quiet, too black, too poor, too anything. I think about them, and I hope they hear this story. I hope they understand. They laughed when I walked into that courtroom. 62 years old, black, alone, no lawyer, no money, but I'm a nurse. And nurses? We don't fight loud, we fight smart, and we always finish the chart. Lana Green lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She volunteers with organizations helping women navigate divorce proceedings and workers facing pension fraud. Reginald Thompson is serving 15 years at FCY Edgefield. Thompson Logistics Solutions' 430 employees received full restitution for stolen retirement funds. Sharon Mitchell retired in 2026 with a full pension. If you've ever been underestimated, share this story. If you've ever been told you're too anything to fight back, share this story. If you've ever kept receipts when everyone told you to let it go, share this story. Because the world needs to know, documentation is power, patience is strategy, and being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it. Drop a comment if this story hit you. Tell me, what receipts are you keeping? And subscribe, because there are more stories of people who refuse to stay silent. People who fought smart. People who won. Thank you for listening. It meant everything.